can I be not only cook for myself? So when I talk to my male friends and you critique them for not cooking, they will often say, no, I make my chai, I cook meat curry once on Sunday, but they never think about cooking for other people. They'll say, I'm independent because I can cook for myself, okay? So my 6-month-old son, and subsequently until he was 18 years old, posed me the question, which is, can I become the primary caregiver?
I wanted to ask you now, you wrote in your book that it is the force of circumstances that got you into the kitchen, and that you did think of cooking as something that a man raised in India wouldn't have to consider doing. As though cooking, I mean, he's been very, very candid. He says that Indian men are raised under this misconception that cooking is an inferior person's job. It's a being of superior intellect shouldn't have to enter the kitchen, especially if he's male. So could you tell us about how did you get into the kitchen?
Yeah, it's got a bit parallel with Asma's, and then of course kind of goes off in a different direction, but the theme is the same. Bengali academics are lethal, so let's accept that. And so my trajectory was similar politics, and I'd done a lot of progressive politics in Delhi University, and then I went to the US to do my PhD. Of course, the first thing that hit me was nostalgia through food, and kind of a deeply embodied nostalgia. And that set off a chain kind of a thinking where, in fact, I had gone to do my PhD on questions of development and underdevelopment, and which is often classic, at least my generation, of scholars interested in progressive views. The question was, why is India underdeveloped, and how did that happen? And this particular university had a fantastic reputation of a bunch of scholars like Emanuel Wallerstein, James Petrus, Mark Selden, who were interested in this whole question of how the underdeveloped world was in fact underdeveloped rather than left behind. But while I had gone there to study these questions, the nostalgia came to me through this embodied sense of loss. But even more kind of substantively changing was this question of, I had grown up by that point of time, 20-some years in India, and had never thought about cooking and had never cooked. That I could be a 20-something male and not have ever cooked or thought about it, in spite of my progressive politics, was totally an absurd kind of a proposition. And so I went to my advisor and I said, I think I'm going to change my topic and start looking at immigrants and how they have dealt with this question of loss of access to this very embodied memory, and I'll do a comparative study of Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, and Indian immigrants. So that was the first set of kind of a provocation that led me to my work on food, and which I see today as the question of care and caregiving, and which is central to the question, I think, the crisis we face in terms of questions of sustainability, in questions of care work. The second set that was built on it, subsequently, I was married, I had a child, and this is kind of a bit of a complex story I had to take care of the child because of serious mental illness of my ex-wife, and about 6 months old, since 6 months old, and he's right now in college, for about 18 years now, I have raised him. So that was the second set of questions, that was, can I be not only cook for myself, So when I talk to my male friends and you critique them for not cooking, they will often say, no, I make my chai, I cook meat curry once on Sunday, but they never think about cooking for other people. They'll say, I'm independent because I can cook for myself, okay? So my 6-month-old son, and subsequently until he was 18 years old, posed me the question, which is, can I become the primary caregiver? So I eventually became the primary caregiver, and as I've said before, I learned to cook by, in fact, failing to cook. I talked to my mother. By the way, that's exactly how my mother learned to cook. She got married into a family with 13 siblings. She was married to one of them, and she had to take care of all the rest of them. She didn't know how to cook, and she got married into the family, and she was reprimanded by her mother-in-law for not being a cook, and she struggled to replicate her mother-in-law's recipes, and in failing to do so, produced her own repertoire, and she has become the best cook ever now, of course, after 50 years of cooking. Similarly, I, in fact, became a cook and started thinking and writing about cooking precisely by, in fact, first recognizing that I had failed to do so, and then second, in trying to replicate my mother's recipes and failing to do so, I have developed my own repertoire, and I in fact think that is how most people cook and learn to cook and become cooks. In fact, not by being successful in replicating, by in fact failing to replicate, and in doing that, generating their repertoire. And that's kind of, in some ways, in short, trying to cut out too much melodrama out of the story, otherwise it'll kind of be a Bollywood melodrama, is now I see, and my son for the last week was at home by himself in Manhattan, and cooking for him every meal, every day, and he would send me pictures on WhatsApp and talk about what was working well and what didn't work well, how things were undersalted, and it's a beautiful perspective to see him learn how to cook by failing to cook like me.
If you've enjoyed the conversation that you just heard, do subscribe to our channel for much more.